Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast episode. I'm very excited to have Jason Beckett. He's the president and COO of Proactive Dealer Solutions. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's just been in recent years that you and I and the team at Proactive Dealer Solutions have been having more active dialogue. Before we jump into this exciting product area of digital voice assistance, in case dealers aren't familiar with how long you're in the business and what is the evolution of the company, Jason, could you give us a little thumbnail of the services that you're currently offering dealers?
Yeah, so Proactive Dealer Solutions started in 2002. So we've been around for about 20 years. We focus on lead and process management for automotive dealerships. And so over the last 20 years, we've implemented about 4,000 BDCs across the US and Canada. And over the most recent years, we've started to transition more into call monitoring, which led us into digital voice assistance and trying to help dealers with better workflows and more efficiency in how they run their dealerships.
And I know that you've worked side by side with some OEMs to help dealers actually implement a modern retailing process and kind of modifying how that BDC / lead opportunity workflows are being handled, correct?
Yeah, so just prior to COVID, we started down this journey of looking into what digital retailing is and modern retailing is, and that was really timely for us. And as you mentioned, yeah, we're working with several OEMs now to help as these OEMs start deploying these digital retailing solutions, really going into the dealerships and helping with culture change and making sure that these systems that are put in place are leveraged by the dealerships to drive more digital business.
Well, it's an exciting time to be in the automotive industry, a lot of uncertainty as well. And the reason why I'm excited about today's podcast discussion, because very few dealers are addressing a huge gap in their sales process for fixed ops, which relates to, and no surprise to anyone, the booking, changing, or even canceling of service appointments. So I want to set the stage for all our listeners. It's clear that getting people to work in automotive retail is a challenge, just like all retail establishments are challenged to find workers. Post-pandemic, there's been a shift in the life-work balance in many people's minds. There has been a shift to work at home. But when it comes to the service drive and automotive retail, remote working doesn't really pan out, except when you can outsource certain tasks. And one of the things we want to talk about today is, since it's more expensive than ever to hire employees, since turnover is always a challenge, what if there was a way to automate some of those repeated tasks, those simple opportunities, especially around scheduling service? So, Jason, tell us how Brook.ai, your digital voice assistant, was born.
Yeah, so we started off in call monitoring probably back in about 2016. And we have a product called Caller CX that would track and record the calls coming into dealerships. And we'd use artificial intelligence to classify, score those calls, provide insights back to the dealership. And we did that for kind of two reasons. One, to help develop and train the staff that was handling those calls to do a better job. And second, if a opportunity was mishandled, to alert management so they could choose to jump in and save the deal. So Caller CX is really built to help connect more calls and then convert those calls. And what we found like any tool, is it's only as good as its handler. We had many stores that did a really good job, and we had others that didn't, just because there wasn't that management engagement. What we see is about the average dealership misses about 30 to 40% of their inbound service calls. A good store can get it down below 10% easy. We realized, through this product, that we were sitting on a ton of data about how calls were being well handled and how they weren't. And on the service side, 75% of those calls that come in are routine calls. They're to schedule an appointment, change or cancel an appointment, location, hours of operation, what services they offer. It felt prime for technology like a digital voice assistant to start handling those calls. So we set off to answer the question, could we train a machine to handle those calls as well as the top performing agents were that we were scoring? And, timing was kind of everything for us. We started building the digital voice assistant, Brooke, in 2019, with COVID and then the Great Resignation. That really just exasperated, the needs for dealers to find some relief on how they handle these inbound calls.
And one of the things that I like when you think of entrepreneurial businesses that are not afraid to blow up other pieces of their business to stay relevant. I mean, one of the high marks of your company is dealers who praise your virtual BDC services. So dealers who don't have a BDC or need flex staffing to handle high periods of calls or leads. So you have an industry reputation of being a leader in virtual BDC, and you create a product that would actually, in a sense, cannibalize a little bit of your BDC business. Very bold move. How are you thinking about that? Because it's what Apple did to their own products, and we've seen how successful that company is. What was the mindset shift that, hey, it's okay, guys, we need to give dealers choice and reduce their costs?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had the mindset that customer experience is always going to win. And if we didn't do it and cannibalized our business, someone else would. And we, further, we really see it as a complement. Brooke is a complement to our virtual BDC. We have a lot of dealers that use Brooke to handle their inbound service calls for appointments, but use our virtual BDC to also handle the calls that maybe Brooke can't, the more complicated calls, or to do outbound proactive campaigns that really generate new business that the dealership didn't already have.
Right. So those, there's 8 or 9 common outbound campaigns that, if the BDC is flooded with service appointment calls or bookings or changes, they just can't get to them all.
Correct. Yeah. And we have some dealers that, do want to use people first and use our virtual BDC to handle those calls. But as we have peaks, it's nice to have that safety net that Brooke can jump in and handle the calls when maybe a dealer's BDC staff are all on the call at that time.
Right. And so, when I visit dealers, one of the new checklist items in my normal coaching audit is asking if they're using a digital voice assistant. Some have never thought about it. Some have not heard about the product. Others are like, yeah, we love it and it's working. What do you believe has driven the adoption, other than just, as you mentioned, COVID, people couldn't get in, or the challenges in finding employees? What is another factor, another trademark of the dealers who have embraced Brooke and really found a way to make it work?
Yeah, I think early on, and the adoption, for a new product can be pretty slow, especially when you're launching new technology. A lot of that time is spent educating the market. COVID and the Great Resignation really helped expedited the dealers to kind of learn about new technology and new solutions that could help, resolve the problems they were having in their drive with handling the calls, whether that was, service advisors handling those calls or the BDC. A lot of the dealers that first came to us, because they want to prove that the technology works within their dealership, they came for us for after hours. Those calls aren't being answered anyway. There's no risk in having a digital voice assistant take those calls. What we find, though, is that's only about 1% of the calls that we handle. A lot of dealers signed up for after hours, set up Brook to handle after hours and overflow, and quickly become aware that they're not handling as many calls as they thought they were, that they did have this 30% of calls that were being dropped that they thought were being handled. So initially, when we first launched a product, as dealers were coming in wanting to start slow, it quickly showed them that a lot of these calls were not being handled, and Brook was jumping in and booking them as well, if not better, than the agents were.
Well, that's music to dealers' ears. I mean, how many times have you heard this statement? It's so true, though. I only know what I know, right? And if you don't know that calls are being missed, if you aren't measuring how calls are being handled, it could reduce the urgency of change. And I want to tell everyone who's listening on today's podcast, the reason why I'm excited about this type of technology is because in other areas of retail, we're used to 24/7 self-service, right? I can go on my United app or my Delta app, change, my flights. I can upgrade flights. I mean, they've made it easy for that. For the most part, today's online service schedulers are still very antiquated. There's no mobile app for it. No one wants to necessarily fight through a normal service scheduler tool on a dealer's website. And so having the ability to market, hey, now that you're a customer of our dealership, you can call 24/7, talk to Brook, book, change, or schedule an appointment. That's music to my ear, because it's just what we expect from other retail establishments. So, Jason, when we think of what Brook can do today, this is a great return on spend and that dealers can make, and increases customer satisfaction. And we should all be looking for those quick wins. But what's on the roadmap? What could Brook be doing now that you see the data, now that opportunities are clear, now that adoption has started? What looks like the next 6 months, 12 months for Brook as an opportunity to help dealers improve the customer experience and save the money?
Yeah, great. And maybe I'll just wrap up on the adoption piece. I think the proof is in the pudding. And when we partnered with Xtime when we first launched Brook, and that's been a great partnership. We're their preferred digital voice assistant. And what that's allowed us to do, and more importantly for the dealers, is be able to quantify how Brook compares to their other channels that are booking appointments, whether that's directly in the DMS by the service advisors, whether it's the BDC agents, whether it's through the web portal. And what we're seeing is Brook's show rate is on par at 80% plus with BDC agents. But what's interesting is that she's actually booking at the dollars per RO of on average $437, which is $30 higher than the typical agent. So we're outperforming the BDC, and the reason is because she's so consistent and thorough in collecting the information and booking the right appointments.
You know,
As we look,
you
sorry,
brought
go
up
ahead.
something, Jason, and I wanted to ask because this is so important. You're integrating with the largest DMS players. You mentioned this special partnership with Xtime, but you just completed an amazing integration with one of the disruptors in the DMS world. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we're pleased to announce that as of this morning, we just completed integration with Techion. So in addition to CDK, Reynolds, Automate, and Xtime, we're now also going to be supporting Techion.
That is awesome. You know, one of the things, Jason, I was just recently down in Dallas. I visited the offices of Dealer Built, which is another amazing company in the DMS space. Are they on your radar for integration at this point?
We're hoping. We have about 5 other, talking about the roadmap, we have 5 other scheduling tools and DMSs that we're working on.
Great.
We actually this month just launched another feature, which now Brooke will, when a customer calls in to book a service appointment, Brooke will actually provide their scheduled maintenance recommendations and add that to the appointment based off of the manufacturer recommended maintenance. And we also, if we have their VIN, we will look up if they have any open recalls and offer to put that on the appointment as well. So when we talk about the average dollars per RO that Brooke's booking at $437, we're expecting that to increase now with Brooke upselling scheduled maintenance and open recalls.
Let's pause there for a minute on the recalls, Jason. I know that just from my experience, I've never booked a service appointment where they've checked whether or not it was a recall. I've always been surprised when I get to the dealership and I have an appointment. Let's just say it was for an oil change tire. And they're like, oh, Mr. Pash, this happened to me with my Honda. Mr. Pash, there's a couple recall items. And I'm like, okay, how much longer is that going to be? It's like, well, I'll be another hour and a half. Now, now you're in a bind because I wasn't planning on staying that long and I was waiting, so having Brooke be able to advise, recommend, not only increases the dollars per RO, but it also creates a more seamless customer expectation on whether they're going to stay or whether they're going to need a car. So I think that's a big thing. But when we come to recalls, I'm a little concerned about part supply. How does a dealer who wants to offer recall upsells as part of Brooke, but maybe there's one recall where the part is on back order for 6 months, how does a dealer maybe select which recalls they know they can fulfill right now, Jason?
Yeah, great point. So we, as part of that upsell service that Brooke offers, it includes a recall manager. So dealership staff can go in and they can exclude or include certain recalls depending on whether those parts are available or not, or if they don't want to offer a certain recall for whatever reason. So all of that is in the control of the dealer on how and what recalls are offered.
That is perfect. Now let's get back to the roadmap. What's the next step for Brooke as you're handling scheduling, changing, canceling, you're seeing if there's recommended maintenance as an upsell, you're seeing if there's a recall. These are all inbound phone calls, Jason. What about Brooke being able to help a dealer with those simple outbound campaigns?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that is on our roadmap, and we're planning to launch before the end of the year, which is Brooke being able to do outbound recalls, calling so basically what happens there, we have access to the DMS data. We scrub the DMS data for the VINs. We run those VINs through a third party, determine what vehicles have recalls on them. And then we provide a portal for the dealers to then choose, how they want to fill their shop with those recalls. And that was one of the big problems we had to solve when we built Brook. A lot of people think that the conversational AI piece, the idea of having a digital voice and be able to have an intelligent conversation about booking a service appointment was the difficult part, and it was. But the harder part was really about building a digital voice assistant that could book appointments within the capacity and the scheduling rules of the dealership. We learned very quickly early on that it was very important for us to accurately capture the information of what the caller was saying, whether that was their contact information, first name, last name, but more importantly, the vehicle and the services, that we needed to get that right. Because what we found is if we got that wrong, then it could throw havoc to the service drive. I'll give you an example. Customer calls in and asks for an oil change. If we were to book that as a diagnostic, then all of a sudden that appointment moves from the quick service lane to the main shop and takes away from capacity that the main shop could be working on. So we spent a lot of time tuning our accuracy to capture all the different services, all the different vehicles, and validate that with the caller to make sure that we were booking the right thing, and then giving the control to the dealership to say, these are the vehicles I want to offer. These are the services I want to offer. These are the transportation options for those services. These are the limits for those transportation options, and getting everything right with the service advisor and technician schedules, so we weren't overloading the shop. Wow. That was a big hurdle, and we built basically a scheduler from the ground up to support Brook.
Well, that seems to differentiate your product from other products, because obviously all the automation in the world isn't going to help if the load capacity and the business rules that the dealer wants are properly executed. Right, Jason?
Exactly. Yep.
So when we think about general performance expectations, when you walk into a dealer, and whatever the monthly cost is for Brook, how do you quantify their return on investment for this platform? What are the KPIs you look for? I mean, at the end of the day, dealers get hit up for dozens of products a month. So for a dealer says, hey, you know what? I only know what I know. If I can reduce my drop calls, if I can increase my dollars per RO, if I can create a 24/7 service environment that calls are handled properly, I'm all in, but it's still going to cost me something. So how do you talk to dealers about their return on spend?
Yeah, the cost of Brook is less than what you would pay an agent, and Brook can handle all volume of calls 24/7, follows your dealership policies to a T, and is able to appoint at a very high rate. So when we think about ROI, for the cost of less than an agent, we are now driving all of your inbound calls to be handled by that digital voice assistant and freeing up your other staff to go generate new business. One of the things we've built as part of Brook, and because we have access to all the DMS data, is we're able to actually quantify what the revenue, RO revenue is from the calls that Brook handles. So that's something that all of our clients have access to. They can see how Brook is handling the calls, how many appointments she's booking, how she's booking them, what the dollars per RO are. So that's one way that we constantly show them the value that Brook is providing. in addition to that, we're also either freeing up, in the case that they have a BDC, we're freeing up those agents to focus on new outbound business. But for the ones that don't have a BDC and use the service advisors to handle those inbound calls, they're now freed up to provide a better customer experience in the service drive, working with the customers that are belly to belly and doing those thorough walkarounds, which will also drive up your dollars per RO.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the business case is absolutely clear, because I know that on a regular basis, if dealers said, do you have any interruptions in your scheduled outbound customer outreach? Could you be doing more with the people you have on those unique, more difficult, challenging things, or just a real personal, hey, it's a birthday call, you know what I mean? Or anything that you would say, hey, would you like to see your people doing more personalized outreach? And every dealer would say, yeah, Brian, but I can't overspend either. And I'm having trouble with retention, or I'm having trouble with turnover. This is why I think Brooke is in a perfect place at the perfect time to give dealers the scale that they need, the customer service that consumers expect, and the bigger piece here, and you brought it up, increasing their dollars per RO. I think.
And one other thing we didn't mention too is we also see an increase in CSI, because with Brooke handling those calls, we eliminate wait times.
Ooh, yeah.
Which, the customer, they're calling in. A good customer experience is about allowing the customer to complete the task as quickly as possible. And with the ability, with putting Brooke in there to handle those calls, wait times disappear completely. I'll give one example too, to your point. Hodges Ford Mazda in Jacksonville, Florida, they just launched with Brooke to handle their inbound calls, and they immediately saw a 40% increase in outbound appointments because they were able to take their BDC agents off the inbound calls and have them focus on the proactive outbound campaigns, which, is great for the dealership because now they're not bonusing on business they already had. And it's great for the agents too, because, typically with the agent's pay plan, they're getting a higher bonus for the outbound appointments. So they prefer to work on that side of it, but the inbound calls distract them.
I wasn't aware of that difference in pay plan, and that makes even more sense that this product is aligned to incentivize and motivate those BDCs to do outbound, because you're absolutely right. If I was a dealer, I'd probably pay them less on an inbound call that was already coming in. Why not let Brooke handle it? Because she's not on commission, correct, Jason?
She is not.
Well, that's
good. She is a flat fee.
I love that. I love that. Well, for dealers who are listening to today's podcast and would like to see Brooke in action, hear how Brooke is handling calls, Jason, what's the best website or way in which they could interact with Brooke?
Yeah, so they can go to brook.ai. They can reach out to us. We have a phone number that we provide so that a dealer can call in and really test out Brooke. Give her an interview, see how she performs. So if you go to brook.ai, reach out and we can provide that phone number so you can interview Brooke.
And that is great news. And for dealers who are listening to today's podcast, if this is the first time you've listened to one of our podcast sessions, you should know that there are dozens of interviews with industry leaders, disruptors, and innovators, just like Proactive Dealer Solutions, that are helping dealers improve their retail operations and to move to a modern retailing framework. So please take time, whether you use the Apple Podcast channel, Google Play, SoundCloud, or if you visit the native website, Libsyn, that's Libsyn. My channel is brianpash.libsyn.com. Also, in a few months is the Modern Retailing Conference. It's November 13th, 14th, and 15th in beautiful Palm Beach, Florida. This year, the Modern Retailing Conference has 5 educational tracks for all members of your dealership team. There's a track on sales process. Of course, that will be for variable and fixed. There'll be a marketing track. There'll be a new Google Analytics 4 track for the changes that are coming in the industry. There's an HR track. Of course, this has a role. This conversation has a role in HR. How do we attract, retain employees in today's modern retailing world? And lastly, a creative track led by Paul Daly for those who are involved in the branding and marketing and creative brand expression of the dealership. It is an event for all members of the dealership's leadership team. And the great news is the team at Proactive Dealer Solutions will be there showcasing Brooke, showcasing the latest updates and innovations. Let me fix that. And best of all, the team at Proactive Dealer Solutions will be at the conference showcasing the latest updates to Brooke and integrations to help dealers book and generate more dollars per RO in their service drive. It is exactly the right time for this product. Jason, if you had one last word for a dealership general manager, a fixed ops director, or the president of a dealer group who's on the fence about whether or not they should test Brooke, what would you tell them?
I would tell them there's no risk to put in Brooke for 30, 60 days and let Brooke handle your overflow. You'll be surprised. I mean, those calls are not being handled now as it is. You'll be surprised at the results. I ask that you reach out and test out Brooke.
Well, I think many dealers, after listening to the opportunities to create a better work balance, better comp plan for their BDC, better customer experience, higher dollars per RO, more efficiency, lower wait times, and deep integration to all the DMSs that dealers use. Wow. Okay. There's no reason not to try it. So Jason, thank you for your time. And for everyone who tuned in to today's podcast, I look forward to spending time with you again on a future podcast episode.